Welcome or welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. Boy, oh boy, do we have an action-packed guy for you right here. Ladies and gentlemen, Hoby Wedler, Dr. Hoby Wedler. I found this guy through our great friend in the community, Lance Johnson, and I understand that he's has a Ph.D. in chemistry, and he has a company, and he does a ton of stuff. So basically, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you for at least the next 45 minutes to an hour because I want you to walk through your whole beautiful story, and I'm going to learn from you and just love listening to you. So before you became Dr. Hoby Wedler, you started out as a Hoby or you started out as a Wedler. So who is Hoby Wedler? And then who is Dr. Hoby Wedler? And then talk all about your company and all the thoughts that you have about the workings of our universe. I'm definitely going to sit back and listen to you. Go right ahead. You have the microphone.
Well, Aaron, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real honor to speak with amazing people like yourself. I think what you're doing here is really important, just to give an opportunity for folks to chat and explore and learn about the universe as we go. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm honored and flattered to join you today. There's no difference between Hoby Wedler and Dr. Hoby Wedler. It's the same person. It was the same person before. It's the same person after. Um, I'll start out though with my childhood. I don't even quite know where to begin. I was born totally blind, and my parents didn't really know blind people at all. It was new to them. I think my dad had helped someone across the street, or they'd seen blind people walking down the sidewalk, this sort of thing. But aside from that, they really did not know blind people, and they had no idea that their son would be born totally blind. So my eye condition is a super rare one called microphthalmia, which means very small eye. And then my other eye was much enlarged and needed to be enucleated just when I was a few days old. So my small eye saw no light. My large eye really didn't see anything either, and it was enucleated. So I've been pretty much totally blind with no light perception since the beginning. And I wouldn't change that for anything because I really feel like, my blindness is a gift and has taught me so much about the life that I have to live. And, I think that we can take something like blindness that society often thinks of as a disadvantage and turn it into a really amazing advantage. Sort of take our blindness and treat it as our superpower, rather than as a hindrance. And I want to dig into that a little bit later as well, because there's so much there that we can talk about. So as parents of blind children have a choice, mine had a choice, and they could either embrace it and never lower the bar, or they could treat me with kid gloves and have super low expectations. And I am so lucky, and just from chatting with you before the show, Aaron, sounds like you are lucky as well that both of our parents took the first option and never lowered the bar, because those high expectations are so incredibly important. It's kind of funny. My mom called a good friend of hers the day I was born and said, yeah, this is a real tragedy. Toby's born and he's otherwise healthy, but he was born blind. And the friend said, oh, that's no big deal. We can deal with that. And my mom was just sort of stunned by her, not worried and just very straightforward attitude to the whole thing. It's like, what? Blindness isn't a big deal. And what my mom's friend, and now my good friend, went on to tell her is, yeah, her father was a professor of psychology in Arizona, and his best friend, and someone who was a best friend of the family, was a man who was also a professor of psychology who happened to be blind. And, that's really the scoop of things, is that he was a handyman. He was a great psychologist and a great academic himself, but he was also a great handyman. When the dishwasher broke, they called John. When they needed help fixing a car, they called John. When the garbage disposal needed repair, they called John. If a toilet was broken and needed to be replaced, well, that was John's job, right? So she was a young child, fairly young child growing up, watching this blind person who didn't let his blindness look like a disability, and it really didn't treated as a disability. And because of that, and it's kind of amazing when we're kids, the ability we have to just sort of take things in and say, yeah, that doesn't matter. It's just, a trait. It's just like having brown eyes. Doesn't matter. And that's what happened with her and blindness. So she just said, oh, he'll learn how to do everything. No problem. There's no issue there. And I think it's the first probably 10 years of someone's life that you can take and really shape them, right? You can either turn them loose and let them know that the world is their oyster in a safe way, or you can protect them and make them think that they might have a lifelong problem. And that is a huge detriment to them. And, blindness can be one or the other. And it's really up to us and the folks who raise us how it's treated. So my parents said very early on, and they were, by the way, assisted by an amazing group called the Blind Babies Foundation, which is currently a part of the Lighthouse for the Blind of San Francisco. I should say that I was born and raised in a town north of San Francisco called Petaluma, California. I went out to school at Davis for my undergraduate, University of California, Davis for my undergraduate and graduate degrees, and then boomeranged right back to Petaluma to start my business. So to make a long story a little longer, I guess, the Blind Babies Foundation came in. We had an amazing counselor from the time that I was like 2 weeks old by the name of Gail Calvello. And Gail came in and just showed my parents that, he needs to learn to do things on his own. He can crawl over to grab things. He can reach for things. We need to create that curiosity so he starts exploring. And they did that. And I just started really exploring my surroundings. And from the point that I could talk, I'll tell you that I never hesitated to ask more questions than maybe I should have, just really trying to figure things out at their most granular degree, right? And I became early on very good at asking questions. And you might agree with me that when you're blind living in a sighted world, asking good questions is a great way of learning all about the world around us and learning, what the world has to offer. So to me, it's a powerful way to think and a powerful way to learn. And, I would spend a lot of time in the kitchen. When I was my parents never hired people to do anything around the house. We did it all. My dad was really good at so many different trades, from carpentry to electrical to plumbing, and sort of did everything himself. He fixed all our cars himself. And he did it well. He's just very safety conscious. But what that meant is that my sighted brother, who's 2 years older than me, and I could learn from our parents. My mom actually became, that's another story that I'll tell you if you remind me, a teacher of the visually impaired after I was born, and was a teacher of the visually impaired for the Sonoma County Office of Education for over 30 years. So having a TBI at home made it so that I couldn't get away with anything, and B, she knew what I needed to learn. And boy, we did everything from, we'd go to school. This is a little bit later, but we'd go to school during the day, come home, get our homework done. And then in the summertime, especially, work on the house until dark. We basically rebuilt two little houses on our property, and we basically rebuilt both of them throughout the course of my childhood. 1 second. So that was, my upbringing was full of my parents saying, okay, you have an idea, you have something you want to do, figure out how to do it. And that was just inspiring to me. That's the best word I can use, is it inspired me to really do my best and be my best self and deliver results. They taught my brother and me to have super high expectations of ourselves and of them. They wanted to deliver at the highest level as well, and they expected no less of us. The other thing that we learned as kids was that, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. There's no one but us who can take responsibility for ourselves, what we do, and our actions, right? And frankly, if we succeed at something, we deserve that credit. But if we fail at something, I don't love the word fail, but if we fail at something, we should honestly take the blame for it. And something I see happen sometimes in the blindness community when people work with assistants or work with aides in school or whatnot, sometimes it's kind of easy to blame the person helping you rather than to take it on yourself. So even that's a big philosophy of mine that I developed early on that I hold on to throughout my life is in every aspect of life is that, if someone's going to help you, they're there to be your eyes, but you need to own the product of the work that you do in every situation, right? We need to own the product of the work that we do, good or bad. It's just very important to me. Um, so I spent a lot of time in the kitchen with my mom learning how to cook. Pardon my phone. So I spent a lot of time in the kitchen, learning how to cook with both of my parents, mostly my mom, and kind of loved just how you could take flavors, flavorful vegetables or meats and cook them in a dry pan or just heat them up in any way, and they would evoke an aroma. And that just absolutely fascinated me. So my chores might have been a little bit different than the chores of my sighted brother, but boy, we were held to the same amount of work. They made sure that everything was equal. And one of my chores, starting when I was about 9 years old, was making soup for the family. So we thought, and I still believe that soup is a very healthy way to eat. And my parents would freeze the soup that I made in smaller aliquots and basically take it to work with them as a healthier lunch rather than going out. Or it was a great weeknight dinner for the family to explore. And when I was 10 years old, my birthday present was actually a 42 quart soup pot. That's 10.5 gallons. That's a large pot. And Aaron, what was so interesting is that, I realized that, and I realize it now, it felt like kind of a chore at the time. What I realize now is that I was learning how to blend flavors and the art of flavor, aroma, and texture and how they can fit together as a beautiful, beautiful language as my sighted peers were learning how to blend colors and how to draw things on their Etch-a-Sketch. So really we were doing the same things and learning about art the same way, just using a different format, right? But grew to love the time I spent in my kitchen. I learned that ginger and turnips don't mix well together, but celery and carrots and onions mix very well together, for instance. And, what meats go well together, what meats don't go well together. My favorite soup to make was a minestrone, which was just a big blend of vegetables from the garden. We always grew a garden every year, and I would go out to the garden myself and harvest whatever was fresh then, and just make this huge pot of soup full of onions and tomatoes and green beans and greens, fresh greens that just cook down so much, a good amount of Parmesan cheese, some sausage, some really nice pork, some good meats. And yeah, it was just and some canned cannellini beans as well. Just create this really nice soup with a beautiful vegetable broth to back it all. And you learn things early on that I use in my career every day now. Um, like the fact that acid lifts flavor and creates, a really more complex flavor profile than something without acid. So to me, it's all these little tips and tricks that I learned early on that I'm realizing, wow, I use these things in my work as a food scientist and flavor sensory expert today. We'll get to that in a bit. But it was great to have something that I did, to have a job and to do it well and to need to literally sometimes take the paratransit bus myself from the house and shop for the supplies that I would use. I had a really good orientation mobility specialist starting when I was sophomore in high school who pushed me to the limit. And she said, listen, you have what it takes academically to study in college. Now what you need are the skills to live independently, to shop at the local supermarket, to cook your own food, to clean your own house. And boy, she taught me that in spades. And, I'll tell you some stories about orientation mobility in a second that'll you'll see exactly what I mean. But, that's what really gave me the ability to go to college. And even before that, when I was 11 and 12 years old, my parents would send me out on paratransit to buy what I needed for whatever I was cooking. And it was like, yeah, that was just normal. And it was such a gift. Talk a little bit about academics here. I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place, and I'm sorry about that. So I hope we can weave this together in a reasonable way. But academically, I loved math and science. I loved understanding how things fit together, how things worked. And I think this may have stemmed from doing a lot of plumbing work with my dad early on as a kid. Never got too deep into electrical, but plumbing, learning how water comes into a house and how water goes out of a building into a septic system or sewer were always innately fascinating to me. We actually have a little mountain cabin with a water system that pumps water either from a cistern above the hill, up the hill, or a lake. The cabin's on a lake. And we have a submersible pump that runs actually down into the lake. So getting to pump water right from the lake or from the cistern and understand how that system works. And I, to this day, understand the system probably better than most other people who use that cabin because I learned it at a very young age. And that's science. That's, if we can't see things, that literally is as creative as fitting things together in our mind, right? And using our mind to solve problems. And to me, it's if I can fit pipes together and think about, the system that way, there's absolutely no reason I can't, connect atoms to form molecules or connect streets in a town to form, a city and know where buildings are. They use the same skills as a blind chemist. We'll get into that in a second as well. But because of that, I think I really had a knack and a love for math and science, and I fell in love with science, particularly chemistry, when I was a freshman in high school. And it spawned me to want to take honors chemistry and learn a ton from the instructor that we had, who I really liked, by the way. I don't think she was expecting me to try to test into honors chemistry, but I did. And when I got the high score on the test, she kind of had to say, oh, well, let's figure out how we can accommodate you and give you the opportunity to study chemistry. So that was really exciting for me to have that overall experience and learn from her. And, she was interesting because she at first was very nervous about having a blind student in class. And what I did is I worked with her to to find students who had taken the class before me. I found one amazing student who she took the class the year before me and was able to be my lab assistant and also to and homework problems. So that was incredible and so incredibly wonderful to have someone to work with. And it made her feel comfortable about all the physical aspects of safety because she, of course, taught honors chemistry and taught this student before I was in the class and trusted her very much. But when it came to me going to the instructor and saying, hey, I really love, the instructor would stand up in front of the class and say, I hope you think about chemistry as something more than just a science that, is a boring prerequisite that you have to take to study what you really want to study, right? I hope you think about chemistry as a fascinating science and something that you really are eager to study and maybe even pursue a degree in, at least a minor. And I think I was one of the only people in the class that really wanted to pursue a degree in chemistry. That was something I thought, yeah, I love this stuff. I can understand it. It's relatively straightforward. This is what I want to study. And I would talk to the instructor and say to her, who was a good friend and a huge supporter then, an even bigger supporter now. But I'd say, I really want to take chemistry to the next level. And I think I do want to go to university and study chemistry, and probably even major in it. And she would say, oh, Hoby, you're blind and chemistry is so visual. I don't think this is practical. I don't think it's going to be easy for you. I think this is really not a great idea. And I'd say, oh, but I really think I can do it. I'm succeeding in your class with one of the higher grades. And, why don't you think I should be able to do it? And she kept coming back to me with this argument of it being too visual. And I'll never forget this day. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was during the second week of the second semester of honors chemistry. It was a cold January morning. And it was about an hour before school started. I knew the instructor would be up in her room preparing labs and preparing for the day because she was always there super early. And I went into her classroom and I said, I appreciate you. I love chemistry because you're such a good teacher. I want to study chemistry beyond this class. Nobody can see atoms. And she said, oh, that's interesting. You have a point. And I said, we use our eyes. I'm going to pause here. I just got a warning of an unstable internet connection. She said, oh, you have an interesting point here. And I explained to her that we use our eyes to understand things that happen in the lab. Maybe it's a involved. So you see some little bubbles. Maybe the flask, like I say, turns a different color, but those are really the only things we can see. Maybe a fog forms over the solution, which again is a gas being evolved. But what else can we see in the lab? Not a whole lot. We use our minds to do chemistry, and chemistry is truly a cerebral science that we have to think about. And Aaron, it's really amazing. I didn't realize this when I was a junior in high school, talking with my instructor. By the way, she said, hey, you have a really good point. I'm not going to tell you no anymore. And to this day, is one of my biggest supporters and allies. Just an incredible, incredible human, and a very good friend of mine. I'm actually getting together with her after the holiday for to chat and to catch up. I haven't seen her in about a year, so we're due for a good catch up. And what's amazing to me that I've learned over the years since studying chemistry, and again, I didn't understand this as a junior in high school, but we spend a lot of money and time creating instruments to essentially see for us, right? The electromagnetic spectrum is vast. It's very long. It goes from really long radios to tiny, tiny little gamma rays, right? That are very, very short and very high frequency, whereas the radio waves are nice and low frequency and long. If I were to stretch the whole electromagnetic spectrum from the west coast of the United States all the way to the east coast, the visible portion would be about 2 miles of that, the portion that we can see, which is about 400 nanometers wavelength of light to about 700 nanometers wavelength of light. So not very much is visible. And it means that we have to create expensive, high-tech, precise instruments to act as our eyeballs, right? Because no one can see a radio wave. If you're spinning an atomic nucleus around in a technique called nuclear magnetic resonance, nobody can see what's happening with that nucleus. So it spins around and rotates, and we use radio waves to pick up on that. If we're using an X-ray machine to understand a crystal structure, we can't see X-rays. They're too short, right? So we need a machine or an instrument to see those. If we're studying an interesting atomic absorption, we need a machine to measure that absorption, because most absorptions of energy by atoms are not in the visible range. So we literally cannot see them happen, which I find just fascinating. And I love this stuff. So we as chemists are blind to a lot of what we study and what we think about. Like I said, this instructor became it was actually later that summer, the summer of my junior year, when I was invited. I applied and was invited by the National Federation of the Blind to be a participant in their first pioneering Rocket On Science Academy, where we actually worked, 12 of us blind students worked with NASA scientists and other scientists who are both blind and sighted to launch a 10.5-foot rocket from NASA's Wallops Island Space Flight Facility in Virginia. And let me tell you, that was exciting. And it just gave me the confidence that if other people can do this, and, I was chatting with and spending the week with scientists who are blind, scientists with degrees, very successful in their field, who just so happen to be blind. And it's like, yeah, I can do this. Let's go forth and get it done. So thinking through things a little bit further, I ended up going out to the University of California, Davis. I got accepted there, as well as Berkeley. And at the 11th hour, my brother was at Berkeley, and Berkeley was just a little bit too much of a big city for me. I wanted more of a small town vibe, so I chose Davis. So glad I chose Davis. It was an incredible program, and I had amazing support, both from the chemistry department and from someone who I was just beyond blessed to meet, who acted as my assistant and my drive for all things math and science, all the way from undergraduate to when I finished graduate school. So it's just an incredible opportunity there and an incredible individual to work with and collaborate with there. So what a cool opportunity. And I really fell in love with chemistry even more. And at that point, I knew I was in my sophomore, junior year of undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to teach something at the undergraduate level. That was my goal. And if I was going to teach at an undergraduate level, I needed to go to graduate school and get a Ph.D. in something. I thought I wanted that to be chemistry, but I didn't know what types of chemistry would be available to me that I could do on my own without having a sighted assistant looking over my shoulder in the experimental laboratory, 12 to 14 hours a day or whatever graduate school hours are. And that's not too far-fetched what I just said there, 12 hours a day. By the way, it is definitely a safety precaution that is necessary to have a sighted assistant with you at all times in a lab where chemicals are being mixed and you're doing experimental chemistry. So I didn't know if there was a type of chemistry where I wouldn't need that. And because of that, I followed another passion of mine, which is United States history. So I ended up getting a major in United States history and was looking at, and I'm a nerd, so I got a minor in mathematics because I loved, and I still do love the symmetry of mathematics and the way that math applies to chemistry. And I was actually considering applying to several graduate programs in history around California because history is, very literature based. It's very based on the written word, easy stuff to read when you're blind. Wouldn't pose that big of a challenge. I'd be able to study graduate. I'd be able to excel, hopefully, in graduate school with fairly minimal sighted assistance. This was all happening when I met the man who would become my graduate advisor in chemistry. And this is a gentleman by the name of Professor Dean Tantillo. Dean is an incredible mentor to all his students, was an incredible mentor to me because he just said, why don't you come into my lab and try doing a project? And Dean is a computational chemist. So everything we do in Dean's group is actually performed on a computer. So we run quantum mechanics on those structures and see where the atoms move and how the atoms change shapes and what the energy minima or optimizes to as we run calculations. And we can run big, hairy, complex quantum mechanics all the way down to very simple quantum mechanics. And the harder the problem is you're solving, the more computer power you need to solve it, very simply put. Let me back up a little bit here and say that what Dean's group studies is applied organic computational chemistry. And the type of chemistry that I fell in love with while I was an undergraduate student was organic chemistry. Go figure, probably the most visual type of chemistry out there, and that's the one I loved. Why did I love it? Well, organic chemistry is all about carbon, the chemistry of carbon, and it's sort of like puzzle solving, right? So you've got atoms, you've got an array of atoms. You need to figure out what fits next to what moves around to make what happen, et cetera, et cetera. And you can essentially build, molecules out of, by connecting atoms in the correct way. Knowing, for instance, that carbon likes to connect to four things. 4 single bonds, 2 single bonds and a double bond, 2 double bonds, a triple bond and a single bond, etc. And it's all about creating molecules which are just like arrays of pipes in a plumbing system where the intersections are the atoms, and just like the way that streets are comprised in a town where the intersections are atoms and the streets themselves are the bonds between those atoms. So I've been blind since birth. I've been visualizing everything in my mind forever. And I realized that, oh, wait a minute. As I think through this stuff in my mind, I am totally using my brain the same way that I use it to think about how to navigate from my dorm or my apartment rather to the chemistry building, taking it via a few bus routes, as I am when I think about how to connect atoms to form molecules. So getting from the chemistry building to the bus stop wasn't all that different cerebrally for me than thinking about how to perform what we call a Friedel-Crafts acylation reaction to add an acyl group to a benzene. Right. And, that was just really, really fun to have that realization. And when I got to Dean's lab and realized everything was on the computer, sure, we had to build some in-house scripts to allow me to build my structures successfully. I used a way of building molecular models called SMILES, simplified molecular input line entry specification is what SMILES stands for. And we use that to build some of the structures. Some of the structures were too large, and I actually worked with an assistant to build them. Um, and then we would run calculations on these structures and examine the end result. We ended up using a 3D printer that I would print my data on. It was a slow process, so I used it as a proof of concept, but ultimately worked with assistants to understand the end results of my calculations. The way I like to think about it is that, if you set a cat down on a pillow, it's probably going to wiggle around to find the most comfortable position it can be in, right? That's what molecules do when you run calculations on them. You can start the calculation, but then the molecule is going to wiggle around to find the lowest energy conformation, we call it. And we essentially use this way of thinking to understand reaction mechanisms, or essentially why electrons do what they do and go where they go to turn one chemical substance into another. That's very oversimplified, but it explains some of what I did. And I ended up earning my Ph.D. in computational organic chemistry from Dean's lab in 2016. Now, what Dean did for me as a mentor, and I think it's so important that we talk about mentors here, is really he saw a future for me in organic chemistry computationally before I saw it for myself. And as an undergraduate student, he said, just step in and give it a try. I just want you to give it a try. So I did. And it worked. And he said, so now that you feel confident, and I feel confident, if you apply to graduate school in chemistry and you get in, you have a spot waiting for you in my group. And I applied and got in, and lo and behold, that worked. Let me back up and say that, and so I thank Dean profusely to this day for being a truly legendary mentor in my life and my career, every step of the way, just pushing me and making sure that I followed my heart and followed my path, every step of the way. Really appreciate him to no end, and all the amazing gifts that he gave me through being a very special and highly important figure and mentor in my life. So, as I said earlier, I studied and got my PhD ultimately because I love learning, but I also really wanted to teach undergraduate chemistry. I didn't want to teach any undergraduate chemistry class. I wanted to teach freshman chemistry. Students who show up at college into a big lecture hall, don't know what they want to study, and they're in a chemistry class because it's the prerequisite for whatever their current major is. And I wanted to turn those students into people who love chemistry. Now, I had the honor of teaching several classes as a graduate student, and teach in the big lecture halls and all that. And what I realized is that I was spending so much time making my lecture materials less accessible to me and more accessible to my students. And I also realized that my students didn't like to speak chemistry. They wanted their instructor not to say many words and just to point at things and sort of show them how it worked that way. So it really didn't work for me. And it was a bit of a letdown when I realized that maybe I don't want to teach chemistry for my career. But I had something else that I loved, and still love, which is business, and using businesses not as a way to make money and get rich, but as a way to solve real problems that need to be solved. And I thought, if there's a way that I can use my chemistry in business, that will be the holy grail. That will be truly incredible. So let me back up again and tell you that as I was finishing up my undergraduate tenure and beginning graduate school in 2011, I got a call from Francis Ford Coppola. If you don't know, Francis Ford Coppola produces movies. He made The Godfather and others. Now, what a lot of people don't know about Mr. Coppola is that he had a love for wine long and actually made wine. I wouldn't say became a winemaker before a filmmaker, but made wine with his uncle in their New York apartment building starting at age 9. And really that, in his opinion, is what gave him the passion to be an artist and be a film director and a film producer. So I love that. But how did it all come together with Coppola? So Coppola called and said, do you want a position on our team? I need someone who is blind who knows about wine, to build a tasting in the dark experience, a truly blind wine experience. So he had done something in Asia that he thought was good, but a little bit gimmicky. It wasn't led by blind people. And he said, I want this at my winery for hospitality, for my customers, but I want it to be more authentic and led by a blind person. So I've always been fascinated with flavor, aroma, and texture and how they fit together, as we talked about a little bit earlier. And I took a few winemaking classes at UC Davis while I was an undergraduate. We have a big viticulture and enology school. So I was able to take intro to winemaking, intro to wine appreciation. And I was born in Petaluma, which is at the southern end of Sonoma County. And if you know about the California wine region, Sonoma County and Napa County are by far the most prominent wine regions of the state and very well respected within the country and the world as well. And I've always had a fascination with things that are super local happening around me. So the fact that wine was being made, basically in my backyard and then bottled up and shipped around the world as a premium product fascinated me. And my partner's stepfather actually he and I into wine when we were in high school. We tasted some very, very good wines and I learned, okay, this is special. So took these classes at Davis, was an amateur into wine, but really knew how to describe flavor to people. And I had a friend who was sighted before and was a sighted architect, built Francis's winery in 2006, and then unfortunately lost his sight due to a benign brain tumor. I was able to help him once he lost his sight. He made the connection between me and Coppola, and the rest was history. So Tasting in the Dark was born as a once a month experience in the middle of 2011. And we do not do it. And since inception, I do not think about Tasting in the Dark like people think about dining in the dark. We're not going to make people get a spoon and try to eat something when they've never used a spoon as a blind person before. That's just not what we want to do. Not what we're interested in. We want people to explore the world around them through all their senses. And we want to use the blindfold simply as a way to intensify the experiences of their other senses and to change the way that they pay attention to the world and the data that's being delivered to them from the world and how they interact with life. And it's been very, very successful. Started out as once a month, soon became twice a month. And then Mr. Coppola's sales team experienced it. And they said, listen, we want this not for hospitality, but for our team. We want to make this an exclusive experience that we can bring to key markets, either where we want to attract buyers or want to celebrate amazing accounts that are already existing. And we need a really good wine educator. And they said, we want you to do this with us. I went to my chemistry advisor. I said, Dean, this is what's being presented. My laptop is my laboratory. Dean said, I want you to explore all options. I want you to know what works well for you. So yes, do it. So I traveled with Coppola's team and I got my chemistry work done and got my wine work done and just had a blast. And since then, Tasting in the Dark has grown to a wide variety of food products and different industries throughout the world. So we've hosted it all over the world, 3 continents now, and have a really good time with it. And that was my gateway, if you will, to the world of product development and food and beverage. So got a couple of really exciting companies now. One does all sorts of product development, mostly in the wine and spirit space, but we do a lot of work with food and drink in general as well. That company also does the Tasting in the Dark. But what's exciting is that I'm able to use my chemistry every day as I'm building products. We just built a strawberry and peach whiskey one of each for a brand called Hard Hide Spirits down in New Orleans. Really exciting project. We're working on a Caribbean-based liqueur and scaling up that recipe. Also working on a top secret project for a whiskey producer out of Tennessee, and a few wine projects along the way as well. So we have a really good time doing what we do and just delving into the industry as much as possible. And again, really just loving every bit of it. Like I said, that company also is the company that promotes tasting in the dark. I come at product development and also product auditing when I go in and work with a company to figure out what's good about their products, what could be better, and how should we tweak them to make them absolutely tip top of what they could do with their potential. And I use a concept called concept to dollars, which is we'll take an idea, we'll build it out in an R&D lab, and then we'll teach your sales and marketing teams how to use that idea to do what they do best and give them the power to scientifically explain and sell the product, but in a way that is easy to understand. And that's my biggest thing that I just love doing, is empowering teams with the ability to talk about their stuff in a way that makes sense and to popularize or make the science that I do, to popularize science or make the science that I do understandable to the world. So that's a little bit about the one company. There's another company that I'm so excited about. It's very new, called Emotitech. It's based out of northern Italy, out of the city of Bolzano, in the beautiful region of South Tyrol, Italy, which used to be a part of Austria. Very innovative region, very tech-driven. And we're essentially a design company that uses human emotion as our lens through which we build and design products and decide how to design products better. And we're also using human emotion that we're acquiring through hormonal data. If you want to talk about this more later, I can, to understand people's well-being and help people live the best and healthiest lives they can live, from athletes on the sports field to people enjoying their everyday lives. It matters in all cases. And I'm so excited to be involved with that. And it's also really fun to have a company in Italy, because who doesn't want to travel to Italy for work, right? I'll harken back. I know I've talked your ear off probably, but I'll harken back to something that's really interesting to me, which is some of the work that I've done to make chemistry more accessible to other blind students who want to study chemistry, blind scientists, and even blind chemists themselves. So I feel that it's important that, if I'm going to study chemistry and I'm going to love it the way that I do, then I also work to make it accessible to others around around me in the world who happen to be blind or low vision, right? So I realized that in my community of high school students around me, a lot of students were being told, no, chemistry and anything like chemistry, mathematics, biology, whatever, these things are very visual and probably not practical for you to study. So as I was finishing my undergraduate career in 2011, I actually co-founded a nonprofit organization called Accessible Science, which hosted annual chemistry camps for blind students, where we taught our students how to do hands-on accessible chemistry. We ran reactions that produce beautiful smelling esters. They smell like fruit. So when we mix a carboxylic acid, which is really stinky, with an alcohol, which doesn't smell like much, what is the end result? What does it smell like? It smells like pear or pineapple. And the students can assess and understand when we reach the end point of these reactions, because, they can smell them and they can understand that. Most indicators of acid-base titration are visual. They change color. We used household items like onion and garlic that change smell when their acidity changes. So really trying to make the chemistry accessible. We also, they were 2-night, 3-day camps where we would have professors come from UC Davis and other graduate students as well, because I did this as a graduate student, would come talk to the students about their careers and about how the students could study basically what they studied with some assistance, but promoting blind people and blind positive education in the classroom every step of the way. I mean, in the job space every step of the way. So that was really special. And we made sure that our students they were high school students, that they all worked with mentors who were blind. And we were lucky enough to host these programs at Enchanted Hills Camp for the Blind, which is a beautiful 311-acre camp just up the hill from Napa, California on Mount Veeder, nestled in the redwoods. And it is a great place for students to do things that are in a safe environment that might feel uncomfortable to them. And that's what we love doing. We love providing students a safe space to do things that feel uncomfortable. And we would encourage our students and mentors, usually 2 to 3 students for every mentor. We'd say, go for hikes, get lost, because when we get lost, that's when we learn how to find our way. And that's when we learn how to solve these real life problems that we deal with as blind folks living in a sighted world every day. So I'm all about getting lost and finding our way, as much as we possibly can. Those camps were super exciting. Actually got recognized. I was honored to be awarded a Champion of Change award by President Obama for enhancing education and employment opportunities for folks with disabilities. And we had to close Accessible Science when I needed to start my businesses in 2016. But I still do these chemistry camps for whoever and wherever I can, because I believe in true accessibility. To that end, I'm working with a group, the Brian Shaw Group at Baylor University, to develop technology right now that makes it not only possible for blind people to study in the classroom, but this technology is like a robot, so that blind people can actually sit at a computer and use the robot to do experimental chemistry for them, right? Or a device that we use to load something called gel electrophoresis plates, something that I wouldn't in my wildest dreams have imagined I could do, a year ago. But we built it and we developed it. And boy, it is so exciting. We currently have a paper out for review in a very exciting journal, which I can't mention right now, but it will soon reveal itself. So that work is based on not only teaching chemistry accessible. Once we teach you chemistry, we also want you to be able to step into the lab if you happen to be blind or low vision and do chemistry research alongside your sighted peers in every way possible. Aaron, that was a long-winded way of telling my story. I'm sure I left parts out, but I did the best I could. And now I'd like to give you back the mic for any questions.
Well, let's rewind a bit. So for those of you listeners at home from around the universe who got lost in the classroom, lost on the highway, hi, nice to meet you. You're listening to Aaron's Opinion. My name's Aaron Richmond. I gotta tell you something. I have a question. Okay, of many. How much is that whiskey? Give me that whiskey. I don't care how many times, I don't care how many people you have to contact. Give me that whiskey bottle, man. Give me that strawberry whiskey drink. Cause that is my kind of thing. Give me that bottle. Give me that bottle. Okay. Look,
yeah, no, the bottle's available currently in the South, in Louisiana and Texas and Tennessee, but I'll do what I can to send you one.
Yeah, we'll have to connect, and don't tell me you don't know numbers and don't have contacts in that contact, but we'll have to. Well, I mean, it's sort of a chemical reaction here. We're gonna have to make something happen. We're gonna have to sneak a bottle all the way across the ocean to wherever I might be. Hoby, I gotta tell you something, man. That was the most I think I've ever learned from any human being in my existence on planet Earth. So let me.
It's very flattering of you to say that.
I'm not trying to flatter. I'm just trying to tell you. Can you just accept the truth? Okay. Are you one of these people who are gonna just accept it? Okay. Just accept the truth. Okay.
Thank you.
It's not always about the chemistry. Sometimes I'm just telling you the truth. That was good. Okay. Let me just kind of rewind the momentum and let me tell you something. Of all the students who you want to teach in your chemistry class, you don't want me. I never had any scientific education at all. In fact, I was held back tremendously by the school system wherever that was. Yeah. And don't worry. Once we connect later today, I need to get your number, your professional number, where I can text you and get you over to WhatsApp, and I will gladly send you articles about my childhood and some things that happened to me. But I was one of these blind people that was really tremendously held back in life, not by my parents who pushed me, as yours
Mhm.
did, but by by whatever system I was growing up in.
Interesting.
So I never, yeah. So, the reality for my life and the reality of your lives are two different lives and two different planes of existence.
Right.
The overwhelming reality is that the majority of blind people in America are not being exposed enough at all to any science, let alone your level of PhD science.
And you know what I think that is, Aaron?
However, I will tell you that I cannot applaud you enough for what you are
Thank
doing
you.
and will do. You should never feel you should never feel a sense of guilt, the fact that you were given more of a chance, because the fact is you took that chance to help other people. So that's doing the right thing.
You know, I
I
think a
will
lot
tell
of
you,
this,
yeah,
Aaron, if I
yeah,
can just jump in here really quickly, because
absolutely.
you spawned an idea.
Yeah.
You know, I do not believe that the reason that people are held back is due to discrimination. I believe it's because society just doesn't know what we can do. They don't know what our capabilities are. They don't know what our limits are. So I have a motto that I live by, and I think this is one of the reasons that things worked out okay. My motto is educate, don't litigate. So I am never the guy who's saying, you should be doing this and you didn't, and I'm upset and I'm going to sue you or, this sort of stuff. My motto is, it doesn't seem like you understand. Let me explain to you why this works and really be allies and collaborators rather than adversaries, right? So, and this is something that I cannot stress to any folks with disabilities or anyone for that matter, anyone around the world. Try to educate rather than litigating, right? Because when we make it fun and we just show people what we can do, then they have a desire to work with us and a desire to advocate with us. And then we become our own best advocates because now we've got all these allies and all these collaborators around us. And it's up to us whether or not we form those.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. So, yeah. So, I mean, in my life, I've had to do a lot of all of that, to obtain the bachelor's that I have,
Yeah.
in international studies. So most of my background revolves around, as I said, education, language acquisition, being bilingual, that type of thing. And there are many elements in being a bilingual person that are actually quite, in some odd ways, quite scientific and quite similar to what you would do in some ways in
Explain that to
chemistry.
me.
Well, what do you, well, I'm going to really, I'm going to make you sweat because you can handle it. So what do you really want to know about a bilingual person like me? Hobie, I think we lost you.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, why'd you mute?
I actually,
Okay. So, okay, so did you hear my
sorry, I just
question?
hit the,
No,
my
no
hand
problem.
just hit the,
Well, well, let's not hit our hand. Okay. So, what questions do you have for me as a bilingual person? What do you really want to know?
yeah, I want to know, first of all, what inspires you to, I have sort of had a knack for chemistry. Explain that sort of knack for bilingual, your bilingual property with me and how that might be similar to me with chemistry. And then you mentioned the science of being bilingual, and I want to understand that scientifically.
What really inspires me to be bilingual is when I was in high school, my parents told me to learn French. Now, both of my parents are American, but they were at one point, and my father still is a French speaker. And my father and I are fluent in French now. But so what they said is you really need to learn French. And I never really got it. I never, the first, couple years of French in high school and university, I never got it and I never thought I could do it. And then I went to France and I was pushed into environments where the people just won't speak English. They either won't or they can't. And so then I discovered that actually when you address someone appropriately in French and when you interact with them, they respond to you in the right way. And it was
Mhm.
really, really magical. And then I started to become more interested in French people and then have an interest in engaging with French people. And now one of my favorite things to do is just to go to France and just talk to the local people, whether they want to talk to me or not. I'll just walk around and just talk to people, mainly just to see what their reaction is. I always love going up to random French people and asking questions. I always love doing that. Love doing that to people. It was funny because when I was in France the first time, my guide dog, who passed away during the pandemic of old age, but my guide dog then, people would come up and random French people would ask me directions to various buildings. And I had to explain, well, I don't live here, but why are you asking me for directions and things like that? So there was all sorts of strange things. The true equation to being bilingual and the true connection to your mind and your sense of existence is that being a bilingual person, your brain is constantly solving the equation of communication and expression. You have to find different ways of putting words together. In English, we have a syntax, right? you know I want the ice cream. I eat the ice cream, right? Well, in French, it's different
Mhm.
word order, right? So then my brain has to think differently to solve the same problem. And what I've come to understand as someone who teaches more and more people from all over Europe who speak many languages is the most compelling argument for why it's beautiful to be bilingual is that a bilingual person understands how similar we all actually are and that we just
Right.
simply have different chemicals and different words to
Mhm.
get the same reaction out of people. And that's truly what inspires me to be
Yeah, that's
bilingual. I've
remarkable.
interviewed a couple of French people and hopefully I'll interview one soon. And provided that you join our WhatsApp communities and connect with me through text, provided that I get further contact information about you after this conversation, you'll certainly be the first to know when this episode drops, B, when we interview the next exciting person. So that's kind of my whole, well, to use French, raison d'être, right? My whole reason of being is that really when you think about solving problems, I'm going to solve a problem through speech and vocalization and language
Mhm.
skills. And you're very right. For someone who specializes in chemistry, you're awfully talkative. You're awfully sociable, because most of the science people that I've dealt with, as you well know, can be amazingly antisocial people that actually don't want to talk, and that is
That's
a very common stereotype of a scientist. They don't really want to. They don't really have good vocal skills. But
one of my
you're
superpowers is
really gifted.
understanding. One of my
Yeah,
superpowers is understanding some science, but also loving to talk to people.
you truly do.
I love marketing, I love storytelling, and I love using science to do it.
Well, there you go. Well, there you go,
Yeah.
man. So that's kind of my story. But back to you. So this whole um tasting in the dark, with
Yeah.
with the wine. So okay, so if I sat down at your tasting, let me make you sweat. So kind of how I talk, how I act. So what are you going to give me? What are you going to pour in my glass? Now I love all sorts of wines and beers from all over the universe. So what are you going to give me?
It depends on what the goal of the experience is. So I do these as brand activations for very particular brands.
Right.
And if I was doing one of those, I would pour would be a very good representation of that brand. If you brought me in to do a corporate offsite, I would talk to you about the group. I get to understand the group. Everybody tastes the same thing, but just knowing you right now, I'd probably pour you four wines. I'd start you off with a Sauvignon Blanc because it's a really nice crisp white. Then I'd move you to a Pinot Noir, which is a nice red that is from a cooler climate. In France, from Burgundy. In the United States, from some of our cooler regions, like the Russian River Valley here in Sonoma County. And then I'd just pull your leg and move you back to something white, maybe a Gewürztraminer, because it's a really interesting, eclectic floral grape. And then I finish you off with a big, bold Syrah or Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah, yeah, you're very right. One of my favorite wines is actually a plum wine, from Japan or Korea, actually. So that's
Oh,
one of
really?
my
What's it
favorite.
called?
I actually don't. Okay, yes, you can laugh. I don't know because the bottle's not written in English.
No
Um,
problem.
I don't know what it is. It's a wine that I've discovered in my local liquor store, and they have that one. They definitely have some wines, some plum wines from Napa Valley, from your region, absolutely. And I've never really been out to that region, really. So I'm mostly an East Coast guy, mostly an East Coast person. But
Do you
that's
enjoy
that,
French wine?
of course, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely, I would because I love the French food to go with the French language. So yeah, of course, yeah,
right.
yeah, absolutely. But that is deeply compelling. So okay, so then what? So then you run these events, and then so do you actually like sell food and sell alcohol, like sell these things to like people and companies? Like how does the actual I understand the spiritual intellectual value here, but where's the money? Where's the business
Yeah,
right there?
it's sold as an experience. It's sold as an experience for corporate groups.
Hmm.
It's sold into brands, that sort of thing. And we're toying with the idea in 2025 of doing some events that are ticketed for the public.
Right,
But no, I
right.
don't have my liquor license or my beer and wine license, so I wouldn't be
Understood.
selling the products directly.
Understood. Very good. So then you basically buy the product and then give it in this tasting venue
Hmm.
to in very
And
compelling.
I'm the
Yeah.
only one that does this, so, and I developed the program, and it's, so it works out that it's my curriculum, and, it
Very
works.
good. Very incredibly brilliant. What has been the most interesting reaction you've ever received during one of these tastings? I mean, every once in a while,
Yeah.
especially, my mother hates a lot of the wine, so we'd be out of tasting and she'd, dump it out or spit it out, what has been some of the most interesting or the most outrageous or outlandish reaction you've ever received during one of your tastings?
It was amazing one time when I was pouring wine and had someone in the tasting who was like brought back to, because it was a similar wine to the wine that she drank when her then boyfriend, soon to be fiance, proposed to her. And she, like, it was many, many years before, but she tasted this wine and then immediately recalled the experience like it was happening right then and explained the whole thing to us. And to me, the power of something that we taste, something that we eat or drink, is so much bigger than the power of a photo. And I'll tell you why. That's because our noses, connect into what's called an olfactory bulb, which has about 8,000 nerve endings on it. And those nerve endings have a very short distance to travel on neuron bridges to bring information to our cerebral cortex. So when we smell something, it's just faster. Our brain works less hard and it's more primitive, but it evokes more memories. It's more evocative than eyesight. So when we look at something, it's interesting because our brain first has to understand how much, it's very technical. But when we look at stuff, what's happening is that um, our optic nerve, well, our retina is converting higher energy or lower energy transretinal to higher energy cisretinal by having it hit by light. That's the energy source. So that happens, and the image, that data is transferred back to the optic nerve, which then has to be transferred down to the cerebral cortex. The image has to be flipped over. And the process of looking at something is actually very mentally taxing and quite strenuous. Even though it's subconscious, it takes a lot of attention.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. You're very right. You're very, very right. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
And yeah, I also love beer too. What's your favorite beer, by the way?
Favorite beer is like asking about a favorite child. I don't know. It depends on the time of year. But for me, what I love is a good sour. I really love
Yeah, me too.
good sours that have a lot of flavor. I love the flavor of hops, but I
Me
can't
too.
do too much hops because it puts me to sleep.
Ah,
The compound in hops is called lupulin, and it's a sleepy compound.
yeah, yeah. It's a sleeping agent. It's a light. I would describe it as a light anesthetic. It definitely can be. Yes, yes.
Mm,
Which is why when I have an IPA, I only have it with a nice big meal,
right.
and a lot of food alongside it. See, with wine and beer, for me, it depends on what I'm eating to pair with it. That's the
hmm
thing. Yeah,
hmm
absolutely.
Have you enjoyed a good cider?
Oh, I love it. In fact, I have it in France, up in the, as you know, up in near France, in France, in Brittany, up in the north in Bretagne. They have cidre, which is their version of, it's like a apple, strong fermented apple drink, which is
Mm.
typically drank with galette, which is like a crepe, which is an incredible pairing there. Yeah.
And is it dry or sweet?
It depends. So it's kind of somewhere in the no man's land. It's a little bit of both. That's why it's good. It has a little bit of a pinch, and then it also has a little bit of a dryness, and it pairs perfectly. Sometimes you can get it with, avec gazeuse, avec with the bubbles, with the gas, as we say, or without the gas. And then the
Uh-huh.
flat one without the gas would be more like a very good, very, very, very rich apple juice, but then the one with the bubbles is obviously stronger and more complementary. But it does depend on the person and the time of year. Absolutely. So yeah, cidre is an amazing drink when paired with a galette, a good
Yeah.
crepe. Yeah.
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 You're making me hungry.
Well, yeah, yeah, of course, of course, of course. So, you really worked with a lot of blind people from around the country. So,
Yeah.
what's really, and I don't know, that's why I'm asking, and then I know that you know the answer, that's also why I'm asking. But so, what have you gauged to be the overall consensus for? Have you done have you done a scientific method project where you figure out, okay, how many blind students around the country are actually acquiring the appropriate amount of scientific literacy? And by the way,
Mhm.
so your knowledge is stellar and your knowledge is special forever, but your knowledge is also knowledge that most people don't need to know what you know. And I don't need to know what you know. I'm appreciative that you know what you know, but I don't need to know what you know. So
Mhm.
what do you really think if a parent, and I'm sure you get this question on the daily. So my son or daughter wants to study this and I don't know how much knowledge they actually need. So how do you understand knowledge and how much knowledge do we really need to be successful in life? What do you really think?
First of all, I don't think a college degree is necessary to be super successful. I don't think it is. I think it helps. For me, both my undergraduate degree and especially my graduate degree taught me to think critically, which is a skill that I wouldn't trade for anything. So I'm very pleased with that skill, first and foremost. But how much information do we need to know? That's a really good question. And I would say the most important thing is to know enough to learn the material in class and be able to successfully speak about it or address it or one of these things, in a group setting. So, um, got to read the book if you're taking a science class. It's very important. Ask a lot of questions and, you know enough to be confident with the material, but you don't have to know it. You don't have to spend a long time getting to know it like absolutely impermeably perfectly. Your knowledge of French is very, very high level, right? Someone who just wants to go communicate in French does not need your level of knowledge or training. And I think same thing's true for chemistry. If someone wants to study something, they don't need to know it like as they don't need to know it as in depth as I understand chemistry, but they should know the concepts that they're being taught. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And
So,
and
yeah.
and here's the other thing that I would say, Aaron, too, that I think is important is I don't think blind people are encouraged enough to study science because getting a degree in science when you can't see, being that science is a pretty visual subject, not because it has to be, but because of the way the world has built it up, it's harder. We have to work harder to understand it. And this brings me to another concept that I want to touch on here. Hang on.
Sure.
After I take a sip of water. The concept is we are only as disabled as the world makes us, right? And I feel very strongly about this. So there's absolutely nothing stopping me from doing a load of laundry in my washer and dryer. However, my washer, for whatever reason, I bought the accessible one, but for whatever reason, even if you power it completely down, when you power it up, it comes on with the previous settings that someone else used. So getting it reset literally is an inaccessible process. Is doing laundry inaccessible to me? Absolutely not. But the tool I use makes it inaccessible. So I think it's important to think about, does science have to be so visual? No. Is it easier for sighted people to use their eyesight when studying science? Yeah, sure, probably. And that's probably why it's so visual. But we are not incapable of studying science. And we are only as disabled as the world makes us.
Yeah. Very true. That's very accurate. Or in other words, the greatest friend that we have is us, and our greatest enemy is us. Right. Absolutely.
In some
Yeah.
ways, but think about all the things out there in the world that
Hmm.
wouldn't be inaccessible to you and wouldn't make you feel disabled if they were designed slightly differently.
Yeah, I guess. But then again, I also believe, as I was raised to believe, that the world is not, see, my world that I live in, you're correct. And also I believe that the world we live in is not supposed to be perfectly accessible for us. The world is not always going to be accommodating.
I
That's
agree.
another thing. Yeah.
And I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So you can't always expect the washer machine or the dishwasher or the technology. The technology is not always going to work perfectly, and it simply won't. So it sounds like you've done a lot of traveling to Italy, by the way. And so
Yeah, it's
what
one of
else
my
can?
favorites.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how's your Italiano? Are you pretty good with speaking to people?
I'm learning fast. I'm learning fast. Yeah, it's interesting because the region where our company is predominantly German speaking because it's in the very
Right.
north of Italy. So it's sort of this mix of German and Italian that I'm learning over time.
Hmm.
Have you set foot in Italy?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been to Ventimiglia, which is near Nice.
It
So
is.
yeah, so
Yep.
if you go to Nice, you can easily go to Ventimiglia. It's interesting because I would always speak French in Italy with the people of Ventimiglia because they live so close to France that they
Right.
speak French.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
We have
yeah.
a very good friend who lives about 50 kilometers east of Ventimiglia in Italy.
Okay, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that is very, very, very fascinating. So. I'm sure that you may have, as you said before we pushed record, you took some snippets of Aaron's opinion. And what I really want to know, and I've never really asked this, but I can tell that you're a critical thinker. So thinking critically about, what we both do in the space and what I do in the space around the world for blind people as a podcaster, right? So what do you think of this concept of Aaron's opinion? What are some things that really affected you, and what do you
Yeah.
really think? What is your what do you really think about what I do, and what do you really want to know about me as a person and me as a podcast? What do you really want to know about me to make me sweat, man?
Yeah. No, I mean, first of all, I think it's a good show. I think it would be probably easier for some folks if you put together more of an interview style for the beginning hour, just to really pull out the content that you want to pull out and really guide the conversation in a direction that you want to guide it. But,
Right.
you know, I think it's fine. I think the direction that you take is fine. Um, what didn't you like about the way podcasts express blindness, which prompted you in 2020 to start Aaron's Opinion?
Well, I really wanted to participate in some of the podcasts that were already being created around the blindness space, and they weren't receptive. And in my opinion, they were not receptive to me. They didn't listen to what
Why
I had to.
not?
Yeah, yeah.
Why
They
weren't they
weren't.
receptive?
They didn't want my. In my opinion, they didn't want my business. I'm too small. I'm too weak. I'm too feeble.
Hmm.
They weren't interested. The other problem, which has always been a perpetual problem, which is a very severe one, is that I have let me just put it very gingerly by telling you that I have a political leaning that is not what the majority of many people with disabilities would believe. So that has
Hmm.
also stood in my way, unfortunately. And I have a very low tolerance, in fact, zero tolerance for maturity problems. But I find that there are people in our society who are unfortunately who, for whatever variety of reasons, don't have the maturity to accept someone else's opinion. And that's both, that's very problem. That's a huge problem for them. And that's a huge issue.
So is
Yeah.
Aaron's Opinion designed to focus on your opinion or to focus on the opinions of your guests?
Well, can't you tell by how long I let you talk that I'm way more concerned with Hoby's opinion?
Sure, but and it's an interesting title. It's an interesting thing.
It's sort of like a play on words almost because I'm Aaron, but my opinion is yours. In other words, I'm giving you the opinion. So I want it to be understood as your chance to come to my microphone and share your
Sure,
opinion. Yeah,
sure.
that's what it's all about, man. Absolutely. Hmm.
And what got you excited when you started this? First of all, how many episodes do you have?
We have a couple hundred. I forget it's in the 270s now. We have a couple
Yeah,
hundred
nice,
episodes.
nice.
But what excited me about this was that I realized that a lot of blind people around the world need this. We're going to talk to one in just a minute from the audience. We have the South Africa office of Aaron's Opinion is sitting there, and he's in the audience, and we're going to talk to him in a minute too. And he has questions, I'm sure. But what really excites me about this is that blind people from all over the world need this content, just like they need your chemistry knowledge. There's people that need to listen to these various episodes because each one is kind of like a meal of knowledge, a bite of knowledge from some guest
Sure.
from somewhere in the world. So what excites me is the necessity that I've learned is that there's a tremendous necessity for this content.
What has been your most proud or most excited moment in the Aaron's Opinion journey?
Well, simply, of course, starting it, having the courage to start the podcast itself, having the courage and humility to see one subscriber grow to two and then four and then 20. Everything starts small, the small little
Yeah.
atoms of development. Nothing starts at 270 episodes,
And how many subscribers are we up to now?
Oh, I don't know. It's in the answer is we're in the 280s. The other answer is we're up to as many as we can.
Yeah,
Right? If you were to ask me, what's your goal? I'm not telling you what my goal is. The goal is subscribe. If you want the goal, get more people. And the
yeah,
goal is
that's
as
right.
many as possible.
That's right.
But there are so many people around the space who do have large audiences and small, but the important thing is to know that everybody's voice needs to be heard and everybody has a story, whether they realize it or not. Everybody's lives are an episode of something. Yeah,
I agree with
absolutely.
that.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we're not broadcasting live, right?
This is not live. No, this is pre-recorded.
And we have someone here listening to us and who's going to
Yeah,
jump in with a
because I
question.
share. So the way, as I said, after the episode, once you join, if I could get your phone number after this, I'll give you my professional number, and then I'll send over some links. I have a Facebook group that you need to be in. Two WhatsApp groups for the community around the world, and so then I post the Zooms for the public to join, and then this particular person has been a major supporter of what we do. One of our biggest fans from South Africa. So yeah, that's how people know about it, and that's how people come into the space. Yeah. Hmm.
Got it. Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Why are you a fluent WhatsApp person, by the way?
Oh yeah, I'm on WhatsApp all the time.
Oh, well, good. Well, give me your number. I've been wanting that for a while, you know?
Yeah, I'll text it. I'll email it over to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. But that is all very deeply fascinating. So my final question, or one of my final questions. So, this is an easy one. How many other blind chemists have you connected with from other countries who also share your knowledge and also have done similar things to you?
Yeah, I know a few blind scientists. So a dear friend of mine, Mona Kara, is
Oh yeah, I've interviewed her. Yeah.
she's great, isn't she?
Yeah, she's a character. She's
Oh,
cool.
she is. She's funny. Have you talked to Matthew Guberman Pfeffer?
No, definitely not. No, haven't heard the name. No.
Another PhD chemist, very smart chemist, very interesting. Would be worth talking to. I can make an intro there.
Oh, please. Yes, please.
Karis Apollo is another blind chemist in the world. A woman by the name of Wanda Diaz Merced is a blind astronomer and really interesting work. She's from Puerto Rico and
Oh yeah.
does wonderful work. So there aren't a whole lot of us, but we're out here.
We're out here floating around the universe,
We
right?
are.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so now before I turn it over to the South Africa office, if you, Dr. Hoby Wedler, can ask me only one question to make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you want to know? Really make me sweat.
I would like to know what advice you would give other blind people about how to live the richest and best lives and how to be as successful and as happy as possible.
The first piece of advice I would give is that people who are sad and angry are sad and angry people, and people who are happy, confident, and successful are always happy, confident, and successful people. The other part of advice I would give people is they should get into podcasting, because every episode that I record here at Aaron's Opinion makes me feel better. I feel better. I feel good. I feel uplifted. I feel happy. I feel proud to call you a great contributor, a great friend here in the Aaron's Opinion family. But simply recording podcast episodes, simply giving this verbal knowledge to the future makes me happy. So that's what you have to do in life to be successful. You also have to figure out that not everything's going to go your way. But what you have to do is figure out, well, what can go my way, and be successful at doing that. And that's the advice. Be happy, be successful, and keep podcasting.
Can I answer that question myself?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go right ahead. Oh,
So my words of advice are very similar to yours. Find what you do that you do best and do it with pride. We all have superpowers, let's just find those superpowers and run with them. And your whole thing about happy, confident, and successful, what I say is have an open mind. Just have an abundance mindset. Let anything go. Be constantly curious and interested in the wonders the world of life has to offer us. We were put on this planet uh, pretty miraculously. The chances of any one particular human existing are incredibly low. And the fact that we are all honored with this opportunity to live on Earth means just give it your best, give it your all.
absolutely.
And some days you might not be happy. That's being human. But dig in, do your work, and remember that at the end of the day, if we can laugh about it 6 months from now, let's laugh about it now.
Well, okay. That's also one of the creators who is cited, who I've never interviewed before, but you know who it is. I'm not going to name drop because I want to focus, but he put out a video. He's very famous. The guy with the British accent, I'm sure you've seen him a lot on YouTube. He puts out a lot of very scientific videos, encouraging people to think, that person. And I remember that video that I watched of his, and where he said that the mathematical chance of all of us being here was so minutely like so ridiculously minute. It was almost a blessing. It was definitely a blessing and miracle from the universe that we
Right.
were born at all. And that's a very interesting thing. People would oftentimes ask me, and I think this is food for thought or thought for food. People would always say, "Well, Aaron, don't you wish you weren't blind?" And I say, "No." Because the reality is, if I wasn't blind, I definitely wouldn't have been born. And they say, "Wow, that's really true. Really? How do you know?" And I say, "Well, I explain it, and you understand that if we weren't born now, if we aren't here now, we would never have been born in the first place." And that's truly a humbling and beautiful thing. Absolutely. But
I agree.
that's what I can say is that we need to maximize every single existence. His name's Latabo. He joins us. He presented one of the most compelling episodes of Aaron's Opinion many years ago. He's one of our greatest friends. Let's go ahead. We're going to unmute him. And we're going to say, let's see here. Okay, let me get over to my keyboard here. All right. Let's see. Hold on one second. And we're going to say, so Latabo, after listening to this,
Mhm.
what question do you have? I know you have a question. That was a mouthful. Go. What's your question for this
No,
Hoby Wedler
actually,
guy?
actually, I don't have a question, but the one thing I do have only just a comment because, well, I don't know much about science. I've never done science before. One thing I can say is, to Mr. Is it what's
Wed, Wed,
Wed
Wedler.
Wedler.
Wedler?
Yeah.
No, you did a great job when it comes to telling your life story and you know also explaining how science is impacting like human life as well. That's one thing I can say on that because I was going to ask a question, but only to find out that I don't have much answers or questions to answer to. I mean to ask that. So one thing I can say is great job on that. And well, Aaron, obviously, as he said, yeah, obviously, I have done I think I can say I've done a great episode with him. That was like 2 years ago, around this time. I think it was in 2021, if
I
I
think it
remember
was. I
Amazing.
correctly.
think you're
So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Latavo, it's great to meet you.
yeah, same here, Mr. Whitler. If I can say
What?
that.
Oh, just call me Hobie. What part of South Africa are you based in?
I'm in Pretoria, but actually, well, before it was named Pretoria, but back in what 2005 they changed it to Tshwane. But many people they might say they still prefer it as Pretoria, if I can say that.
Sure, 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 sure. Well, you guys have a lot of great food and wine down in that area.
Yeah. We do. But to answer that, I'm not someone who like drinks a lot or even like drinks alcohol, unfortunately.
Got it.
So but if you were to give me like wine, it'd rather be non-alcoholic. That's what I
Sure.
enjoy.
No, got it.
Yeah, but when it comes to food, like any food, but with meat, but not just it can be any meat, but except pork. Pork,
Okay.
that's the only one that I don't like. I don't even like. I don't even like touch it at all.
Do
I
you
can
eat
say that.
biltong?
Yeah. Biltong. I can eat that. It's either chicken biltong, beef biltong, yeah, any meat but except pork.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I love biltong.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. All
Well, thank you
right.
guys.
Yeah, well, you are very
yeah.
welcome. So absolutely, that brings us to the end. So thank you, Latabo, and thank
Thanks,
you,
Problem.
Hobie.
Latavo.
So absolutely, Hobie. So as we like to walk out of here, if someone after listening to this incredible talk wants to get in touch with Hobie Wedler, how do they do it?
So I'm at hobywedler.com, HOBYWEDLER.com, and all the social links. I'm at Hoby Wedler on Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, and TikTok.
Excellent. All right, man. Well, look, we will
Don't be
definitely.
strangers. Reach out anytime.
What's that?
I said, don't be strangers. Reach out anytime.
Oh, okay. Well, we definitely will.
Saying that to your guests as well.
Absolutely. Let's see here.
Your listeners as well, sorry.
Absolutely here. Okay. Oh boy. Yeah, here it is here. Okay. All right. All right. Very good. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. We will definitely connect.
I'll shoot you my number.
Yeah, that would be the best thing ever. If I could just have your number, and then I can get you over to my WhatsApp, and then I communicate with my Aaron's Opinion universe mostly over on the WhatsApp. So let's go from
Great.
there. And I want to tell you, thank you from my heart to yours. That was utterly fascinating, and I can't wait to see how the world receives this interview. So this is one of the most interesting conversations. But thank you so much to both of you. Until next time.
Thank you.
Man, oh man, that was incredible. Until next time, as we like to say, stay safe out there and keep podcasting and be well, everybody. And until next time, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.